This video is about the Cornell note-taking system. So I'm going to give you some ideas on some good tips for studying. It turns out that note-taking is not just useful in college, but this is a lifelong skill. Most jobs involve sitting in meetings at some point or another, going to conferences, things where you will want to take down valuable information so that you can learn, recall it, and perhaps share it with others. So this is a system that was developed at Cornell University back in the 1950s, as a good way for students to take notes. And it's a system that when I'm taking classes, even still, I still use. So I use this technique as a student, and many other successful students have used it as well. So let's talk about how it works. So in the general method, you would have a sheet of paper that you're going to take notes on like this one, and what you're going to do is just draw a line so that you divide the paper roughly into 1/3 and then 2/3 over here. So you're going to draw a line down the side of the paper, and sometimes you might want to have a little space down at the bottom or at the top to write things. So you're going to divide your paper like this, so 1/3, 2/3. And then over here you're going to write down some sort of title that you might be talking about in the class, and you probably want to give that a date. So I recommend that you start a fresh page each class day, and so give it a date. So you'll say, oh, today is the 29th of August, and you might also want to give that a page number. So as you go through the different pages of your notes, each one will have a different number, and that way you can keep them in order in your notebook, and you know these are all the pages that go with the notes for August 29th. And then you can add other topics down here as you need to. So this side over here is for taking notes. The first step of the Cornell note-taking system is to record. So what you want to do whenever you're listening to a speaker or doing some reading or watching a video that you're trying to take notes on, you want to write down as much information as you can. Try and focus in on the important points. Use shorthand and abbreviations liberally, but make sure you write in a way that you can read. Hopefully you can read your own handwriting. I prefer cursive, but my cursive can only really be read by me, and even then sometimes it's questionable. So do what you feel is necessary for you. And you want to try and get as much of the information down. Certainly anything that gets written down on a blackboard or a whiteboard or something like that is information that you want to make sure that you have in your notes. So here's where you're going to scribble out all your notes and include all your diagrams about this, that, and the other thing. As you're going along, you're going to scribble notes and you can point to things. Now as you're going, this space over here can be used for things that, the professor says, be sure you take note of this point. Then you can put a little star next to there, because then you've highlighted that as an important point. If you're completely mystified by something that the professor says, then you can put a question mark over there, and that lets you know when you're going back through that you need to make sense of that because you didn't understand what the heck was going on when it was being discussed. And so this other side then is used for these other notes. And so you'll continue taking notes like that, drawing a new line on each new piece of paper and continuing to take notes as you go through any meeting or class that you're trying to take notes for. Alright, so that's the first step of the Cornell note-taking method. Now I actually in college adapted this method a little bit because I found this little bit of space over here kind of restrictive. So what I do, and this works well if you have a 3-ring binder or just an ordinary spiral bound notebook, and what I would do is just take notes on one side of the paper. So I'd write my notes over here, and instead of dividing 1/3, 2/3, all my notes go here, and then over here on the back side of where I have notes, well, this is my page for writing those marginal notes, the little asterisks, the question marks, and we'll talk about what else can go in this space in just a minute. So you can use whichever approach seems to work for you. I liked having more space for my annotations. So notes on one side, annotations on the other. But if you're cramped for space, like on desks that are really small, then the one-page approach also works well. Okay, so there are technically 5 steps to the Cornell note-taking system. We've talked about the first one. So there are 5 R's to the Cornell note-taking system. First is record, so that's where you record your notes. The next stage is to reduce. So what you're going to do as soon after the meeting or class or whatever as you can, you're going to sit back down with your notes and you're going to look at the things that you've recorded, and what you're going to do is try and reduce these notes to what you think is the most important. So try and get keywords, maybe ask a question over here that's answered over here. So you're going to reduce your notes to as few points over here. So over here you're going to reduce notes to important points. So I'm making use of abbreviations there, important points. So we're going to reduce our notes to important points, and so over here we're going to put the main ideas. And so we're going to like, what does this mean? Or you could write down here, definition of virus. So that way you know that this section over here relates to information about the definition of a virus. So what you've done is you've gone through and you reduced your notes. This is an important exercise because it causes your brain to think about what's really the essential information that I'm learning here. What are the things I need to key in on? Then the next step in the 5 R's after you have reduced your notes is to recite. So what you're going to do is take your notes and then cover up the side that has the notes on it. So you're going to cover up that side. Has your notes, and then you're going to go back through and just looking at these key words, what you want to try and do is go the other direction now. Try and fill in as much information as you can about this information without looking at the stuff that you wrote down. So, for example, when you get to that I wrote here, the definition of a virus, it's covered up now. So you want to see if you can define virus. You don't have to recite exactly what was in your notes, but try and do it in your own words. That bit of processing in your brain where you go from what's written down here, a little prompt, to a more fuller description in your own words will really help you learn the material. So the next step in the Cornell method is to reflect. So what you want to do is think about, now that you've sort of thought about the key points, how does that fit in with other stuff that you're learning? What opinions do you have about it? How can you think about how it might be useful to you later on in your career? Where does this fit in the context of the whole course? You know, that kind of stuff. So you want to kind of reflect a little bit. And then finally, the last step, and this is really important, so I'll put a star by this one, is to do some review of your notes. So I recommend that at the end of the week you spend 10 or 15 minutes going back over all the notes that you've taken for that week. And when you have the Cornell note-taking system, it's really helpful because you can just kind of skim these points to remind yourself of things. So being able to use that method will really help you be able to use your knowledge that you currently have to greater and greater efficiency, and you will retain most of what you learn. And that's really important. Finally, when you go to study for exams, how do you do that? There's so much information. Well, now you've got a quick and easy way to go through your notes, see what the important points are. You've got the things highlighted with question marks, so you know when you go to class the next day, you can say, you know, I looked at that, I looked it up in the book, I still don't get what you were saying, can you explain that again? And that's something that then your professor could work on. So the Cornell note-taking system, the 5 R's, record, reduce, recite, reflect, and review. Divide up your notes so that you have notes on one side, and then you have a space for writing down your reductions, your annotations, your questions, your important points, all that kind of stuff. So it makes a very efficient way to use your notes then as a powerful study tool. So I encourage you to adapt this system to your own liking.